All right, Adam Jeffries, man, it's cool to have you on the podcast. Thanks for making the time. Thanks for being in here. Let's get kicked right off. What does it mean for you to be intentional?
When that word intentional can be construed in many ways, and I think in today's era with social medias, Mark, we always tend to think the word intentional is being negative. You intentionally did that to me, or you intentionally did that. But when you look at the word intentional, if you flip it around, it has a pretty positive context. I mean, when I try to look at it, to me, it intentionally means it's your purpose, it's your word is your worth type of thing. And so, when I sit there, and so as a leader or a sales executive, I'm sitting here trying to say we intentionally want to do this, and that's, to me, that's the path forward. That is what we're going to do for our customers, do for our sellers, do for our team, instead of looking at it as maybe a harm type of term. And so, intentionally just living every day for it, and so kind of making each day the best as move forward, and making sure they can see that in me though.
Yeah, yeah, super interesting take, right? I mean, the contrasting of how people use it to describe what somebody's doing to them,
Yep.
right? As opposed to what we typically talk about on this podcast, right? Which is the positive side. Like, hey, as leaders, we get to be more intentional. That's the whole intention behind this podcast. So yeah, super interesting
Mark,
contrast.
I love sports, and I'm always watching analogies and games. And last night I watched a video clip of an intentional balk, and it was a strategy. And everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, that was ridiculous. He should have done that." But then it was genius, and he intentionally did it. And so it depends on what side you saw it on. Some people saw it very negative, but then some people saw very positive. This last weekend, Patrick Mahomes slid, and instead of scoring a touchdown, he intentionally did that for a reason, but it actually hurt the people in Vegas, so to speak, because they didn't cover the spread. And so it depends on how you look at the word intentional. And so, but it's on us to keep it in a positive light. So
Sure.
that's just kind of the biggest takeaway on that word intentional. We got to be careful how we use it.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. All right, so what are you guys doing to be intentional around talent recruitment, retention, attraction, all the things in between? What's working for you guys these days?
That talent is a big subject right now. I know that our HR team is I wouldn't say struggling, but they're challenged to find good talent. There's always going to be turnover in organizations, good and bad. And so, but what some of the things, instead of just having a sign up or an ad up to say we're hiring, we changed it up a little bit and say we're growing, which we are. We're expanding our markets, we're expanding our footprints, and so we're growing. It, again, kind of changes that mindset a little bit. If you always have a sign up to say we're hiring, some people kind of take it for granted. But if you're growing, wow, I want to be there. We're expanding. I want to be on that team. I want to get in that winning culture. And so, we're really doing that. And then we've started doing some things internally, some leadership programs inside, kind of an ACE program, achieving cooperative excellence, and really doing some grassroots with the sales team and with the operations team. Operations is where we probably tend to find ourselves a little short these days, from everybody from yard laborers to rig operators to truck drivers to scale operators. And so that's probably what we're lacking a little bit. And it's not because the salaries aren't there, it's just because it's just the workload and the demand. And so we're really trying to figure out how to automate things, trying to figure out how to take the day-to-day grind off of an employee, so that way when they do go home at the end of the night, they look forward to coming back the next day. And so that's
Hmm.
the biggest thing, is you got to get them home safe and make sure they want to come back the next day.
Yeah. Are you guys finding any success with anything specific in that arena? I know a lot of folks are trying to solve for that specific issue, especially at the operational level. It just it can be a tough job, right? It can be a really tough job, and it can be very demanding, especially certain times of the year. Before we push record, we were talking about just the fact that there's in ag retail, there's not really a time off where there's a lot of down season anymore, right? And we struggle with that, like trying to get people to come to a training program or fit in a
Sure.
coaching program, and it becomes one more thing that has to be fit in instead of an investment we're making in our people, right?
And
So
and
it's a challenge, but yeah, just curious what you guys are doing that's working, if anything specific.
and I think that's a lot of it is work-life balance. Trying to, that's a kind of a buzzword everybody tries to use, and the question is, do they actually act upon it? But when our HR team sat down with key leaders or up and comers and just went back to the base of our what is our company, and said, hey, what do you guys want? What do you want to see? And that's the biggest thing. You can have these meetings and you can collect their feedback, but if they do not see leadership act upon it, it meant nothing, and then it just creates more of a, it wasn't intentional. Go back to question one. And so when they see the changes that they want, implemented or at least adopted in some way, shape, or form, it helps that morale. And so we had one simple come up just a few months ago, and it's things that maybe leaders don't think of, but the employees wanted a boot program. We got clothing programs, for shirts and safety and stuff like that, but they wanted steel toe boots. They wanted new boots to go to work in. Simple. And it's actually a very small investment, but it changed the whole morale of everybody in the company out in the field. And so that was a simple fix. We would have never thought about that. Asking for two-way feedback is how it works.
Yeah. I love that. And I don't think anybody's brought it up yet. Maybe to some extent, listening to people has been mentioned, but man, I mean, how simple is that? Like, what's a pair of boots cost?
Yeah, exactly.
Compared to the cost of having to replace someone.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned something else in there too, though, around like, people seeing leadership do stuff, right? Or even just like making the time to have those conversations. That requires time and intention.
Yep, it does. And it all relates to culture. And I bet if you drew these things out in a circle, it wouldn't matter, or you start crossing them out, culture, intentions, emotions, it's all tied together. And true leaders really get it. So
you bet. All right, well, let's talk about culture for a bit. A lot of people talk about it. I find a lot of people are not super intentional about creating culture. What are you guys doing in your part of the world to try to build culture intentionally within your team?
Yeah. So when you look at culture, I think, I hate going back to the COVID days and thinking about it, but I think when we was all locked down and quarantined is when we probably needed culture the most. Culture is an emotional touch. I mean, it is an emotional touch point. And so, I heard the other day, I was listening to a speaker, and he said something that is one of those little aha moments, the light bulb went off, and he said, culture is built from the top down, but it's felt from the bottom up. Okay. And so, sometimes you could come out here and say, we're going to do all this, but if it's not intentional, it's not acted upon, the bottom's not going to feel it. And then nothing gets changed. And so, but when you start looking about, like your values, listening to the employee, listening to what they want to do, and what you can do for them. That's the biggest thing, is kind of serving them. I don't want to say you just got to do everything and roll. There's things we got to do as leaders, but I find myself asking my sales team and my regional directors is, what can I do for you? What can I take off your plate? What can I follow up for you on to help get a quicker turnaround time? Just taking it off their plate a little bit. It just helps build trust, rapport, which all relates to a better culture. Right now I've been hearing some really good things in the sales team about the direction of the company. They really like the path we're on. They like where we're going. And a lot of it is just because, we're getting answers, we're getting response, we're being heard. That's a lot of it. It's just being heard.
What a difference, just being heard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's something simple, right?
Yeah. It's simple, right? And I think if I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about how do I deploy that within my team, and I do, right? I mean, I get to also deploy that within, we're growing a little sales team over here. We're growing, we're in growth mode, and we're capturing business, and we're trying to put some of those dollars back into the business so that we can serve more clients and do it better and all those things. So what's it's so listening, right? Having those conversations, being open to getting that feedback, doing the following through on some of those things, right? That we're hearing, like your boot program and stuff. Where do you find the biggest challenge in being able to, hook the wagon up to the horses, so to speak, and actually make stuff happen? Like what are the biggest hiccups happen in your experience?
I think the biggest hiccup, and whether you're building culture or delivering emotions, delivering results, it's probably the communication flow. And so when there's decisions made, or maybe it's expansion decisions, or maybe it's on the other side, maybe it's a reduction in workforce, or maybe and I'm going back over the last 25 years of professional life. Corporate America, retail, all goes through hiccups and hurdles and changes. And so I've seen the biggest thing that can build, to get everybody together, is the communication flow. How we communicate, the tone we communicate, but probably necessarily the speed we communicate. I went through a situation just yesterday where an employee found out about a decision we made online, and he was pretty bothered by it. But it was one individual out of maybe 25. And so did the other 24 not care, or is it just one just really passionate about what he does? And so, but I addressed it immediately. I called him and I was like, yes, there's a rhyme and a reason for this, but yes, I need to hear you. I need to probably understand, if there's something that we're doing in your area that affects your day to day, you probably need to know about it before us and before maybe the external audience. And he thanked me. I mean, he said, yes, that's good. I appreciate that. And I do understand there's a reason you got to do what you got to do, but he's like, but just keep me in mind. And I think that probably resonated a lot. It didn't solve his emotional frustration, but
Yeah, nothing changed.
it made him feel heard. It made him like, all right, he actually heard me and he cares about it. And so that's the thing about, it's just the communication flow and the speed, and again, is it intentionally delivered for the right reason?
Mhm. Wow. One of the big challenges I'm finding right now is just in taking my new sales team member who's young and great at networking and great at doing outreach. And that's one of the reasons he's here. So I said, okay, hey, go start putting some of these appointments on my calendar.
Yep.
And next thing you know, calendar's full. It's working great, right? It's working great. And I have to be intentional enough to help him evolve.
Yep.
Right? Because it can't just always be about putting appointments on Mark's calendar. At some point, right
Yep.
now, you got to learn how to take that from where you're at today to cool. Well, now maybe you can take it through the first discovery meeting.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
then maybe you can take it to close after
Yep.
that, or write the proposal. So there's the evolution of that, and from I don't know why, but I'm always surprised at the amount of work that now requires of me.
Yep.
And I have to jump off on some of these calls afterwards and like get into my Word doc and start crafting out this, sales program. And what's that mean? And how does a commission work differently? What's the financial incentive? Is that different based on what he's doing now? And if he takes it all the way to close, is that worth more?
Yep.
Right? We have to
Yep.
really think through. There's a lot of detail and strategy and chess playing that happens from a leadership level that we have to be so intentional about. And I think that's where a lot of people go off the rails, is that a lot of leaders just get overloaded with so much stuff. You're always putting out fires. So when you even have time to be intentional, to think about something as simple as, theoretically simple as crafting an incentive program,
Yep.
right? And I
I
think a
think of
lot
it
of
as
leaders struggle.
delegating. Yeah, no, that's great, and you've hit it spot on. I look at it as leaders, when you transition from maybe management to leadership, sometimes that fear or that art of, and it is an art of delegation, tends to overburden you. And so I find myself, and I've told my direct reports, I don't want you to feel like I'm dumping stuff on you. I'm trying to empower you. I'm trying to help you make decisions and see it from a different light. So when you're in my shoes or in my chair, you understand that you're prepared for it. It's my job is to develop these guys and gals for the next step. So
Yeah. Yes. And therein lies the need. And that's why this is called the intentional
yes,
agribusiness leader, and
yep,
not
yep,
just the business leader or the agribusiness leader, because this is the piece that we're trying to really help people think through, is like, what does it mean for me to be intentional? What are other people doing? What can I incorporate into my own business? And then, what does that mean for me? How does that work? And if we can get a few people just being a little bit more intentional about themselves, that will be great. So with that in mind, I'm gonna jump down the list here a little bit, but so what do you do? What does Adam do to be intentional for himself? How do you grow yourself as a leader? What are you reading these days? What's important, for you in that arena?
And I tell you, Mark, that is one thing that I've got to get better at, and it's wrote down on my daily goals, is actually doing more reading. When you get caught up in life and you get caught up in work, sometimes the books do not get opened. But we've gotten really good at probably listening to podcasts and listening to audiobooks, but there's just something for me about actually reading it. And I've got to take my brain and I've got to switch it to off mode and really read it to understand, and not be thinking about, I'm reading a book, but yet I'm thinking about the sale from yesterday. I'm thinking about this employee situation. And so I've really got to, I find myself struggling to probably shut my brain off and focus on the book. But there is a book I'm reading today, and some people may have heard of it. It's called I Love It Here. It's by Clint Pulver. They call him kind of, and if I had to sum it up, it's like Undercover Boss in book. And this gentleman goes into businesses, and he goes, and what we say earlier, culture's felt from the bottom up, right? He goes into these companies as like a secret shopper. Just nobody knows who he is and what he's doing. He just talks to the employees and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about coming to work here. What do we do?" Or, "I'm thinking about buying some stock here. What do we do?" But then he compares it to what the owner or the CEO or the leader says, and he compares and contrasts. And Mark, there's a massive differences in all industries between what the leadership says and what the culture at the bottom is saying. And so he puts this in a book, and it's the top line is this is a book that all employees wish their boss would read, and that caught my attention. So I'm like, all right, there's probably something in there. There's a golden nugget in there that I can take away. And but it has a lot of short stories and a lot of situations, and that's I'm a situational person, and I love reading that book. And it's you know it's evolved around sporting goods stores, and it's involved around corporate America. It's involved around probably the retail stores that you and I walk in every day. It's just really good, and I've enjoyed it. And so, as a leadership team at the at work, we're actually going through a couple chapters a month and taking a deep dive. As you know, the top 10 leaders in the company, we're going through there and discussing it as leaders, and then kind of breaking it down into our departments with situations we've been in, and maybe employees that would fit well, and kind of like an internal grassroots. And so that's how you got to look at it. But I've enjoyed this one so far, and so this would be one I'd probably go back and reread in a few years from now if I had to.
Wow, that's cool. So it's called I Love My Job.
I No, it's called I Love It Here.
Oh, I love it here. I
I
love
Love
it
It
here.
Here
Yeah.
by Clint Pulver, Pulver, and it's
Okay.
just a really good book.
Yeah. All right. We'll have to link that up somewhere so people can go grab that from Amazon and give it a
Sure.
read. Sounds really interesting. Very cool. What's what's been one of the biggest hurdles you've had to overcome?
I guess the hurdles, it's just always defined on how much they affect us. But I think, looking back over the last 20 years, it's probably hard to pick out. There's always been specific episodes or moments. But I think if you had to sum it up, I think when I look at all my different leadership roles and different positions I've held, I think one that spills over into each company, each field, is just internal chaos.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's because it's not because we're not busy enough, and I just don't know what it is, but so I'm working on it. But I'm finding that internal chaos is, and it can be positive. It really can. When you start asking for feedback, it creates chaos. It creates ideas and dreaming, and whether you're looking to expand into a new region, it creates conversations and what I can solve. Can say busy chaos. Then also we think of chaos as sometimes negative, but I think that's probably been the biggest hurdle as a leader, is probably keeping that to a minimum. But it's getting, again, back to communication, getting the right information out, timely and direct, but then not letting the base of the company, or not letting the operations team, or not letting other segments of the company assume. That's dangerous when you let members of your team, or you keep them in the dark. And it's one of the deals. I heard an analogy: when you walk in and you see the top 6 people sitting in the company behind a glass door and everybody's yelling and angry, you walk away thinking, oh my gosh, something's big's coming, something's not good. And so then that person goes and tells a couple people, then it just spreads like a range fire. And so that's chaos. That's internal chaos. And so I find it doesn't matter where I've been, there's always some of that internal assumptions, whether you're a Fortune 500 company, or whether you're an entrepreneur with 3 people. And so there's always going to be that. And so you just got to communicate through it and make sure the information is timely and accurate. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's super interesting and relatable, story on my part. One of the books that I've been reading this year, cover to cover, is the Old Testament. And as I've gone through all of the stories and of building up, all the, especially in Kings, as you get into the books, First and Second Kings, you read about all the different leaders of Judah and the different leaders of Israel and the things they did and didn't do, and so on and so forth. What I'm finding, as you describe internal chaos at the company today, this is a human pattern that is no different over the last several thousand years. It is consistent and predictable, because as soon as you start making a decision as a leader, and one of the biggest decisions they had to make as a leader in the Old Testament time was, do I allow them to continue worshiping their pagan gods, or do I not?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so, do we allow them to continue worshiping their false idols, or do we not? Right.
Yep.
And I'm not, not trying to get into a sermon here, but it's super interesting. In every case, as you go through the Old Testament, every time they allow the worship of the false idols, the leader doesn't last very long.
Yep.
Or if they do, they lead through chaos the entire time, and they're constantly grifted in battle, whether
Yep.
they're battling internal or battling external. And those, right, of course, that are defining, this is what our culture is going to be. This is what we're going to be about. And this has been, I've read this because in part, I just wanted, I've read the scripture, I've read parts of it, right? And you've heard it in church my whole life, but never read it cover to cover, word for word. So I'm finally going through, and it has been eye-opening to me. It's the best culture book ever written.
Yep.
And it's and Leviticus was literally an HR manual for for the Jewish people.
Yeah.
But what's been really interesting is noting, and this is one of the big lessons for me, noting that when I decide this is what we're going to be about, and this is what what we'll allow, and this is what we won't allow within our culture, that leader has greater success. And that's the leader that lasts for 29, 39,
Yep.
40, plus years, and the
Yep.
other ones don't.
Yep.
So super interesting. Like that's one of the biggest hurdles also that my clients are challenged with, is dealing with the internal strife.
Yeah.
So
And and I think there's a lot of that. There's been some people exit the company, and it's hard when you lose good people, but sometimes it's a relief when you lose somebody that maybe doesn't fit into the organization that can evolve, and sometimes it outgrows people, and or the ideas. And so there's multiple opportunities to ask questions and say, here's the direction, what do you think? But some people just don't belong, and so and I hate to think of it that way, but it is. There's been times where people have intentionally left the company on their own will, and the morale, let's say the internal chaos, kind of goes down a notch. And so sometimes they're keeping that fire stirred up, and or dumping gas on that fire. And so it's sometimes it's a relief when some of these things take care of themselves, and but sometimes it takes a leader to realize what's going on. And
mhm.
but again, that's kind of felt from the bottom up. And so sometimes that mid-range leader, those location managers, those people fighting that front line, has got to communicate that also. And
Yeah.
so it all comes back to being on the same team, the right seat on the bus.
There's an old saying that, and I cannot remember. We have said it over and over on our coaching calls over the years. I can't remember the source, so maybe somebody can cite this for me. This is not a Mark Jewell original by any stretch. I just want to be clear. I'm not taking someone else's work and making it mine. But the quote is that nothing will cost you a good employee faster than watching you tolerate a bad one.
Yep. I just saw something along that lines on LinkedIn last night, or this morning when I woke up, and I think it was on Leadership First or something on LinkedIn, and I've read and I've seen that it just shows up every week, like somebody likes it new, and it just keeps coming back up. I'm like, there's a reason. That's probably the most popular. I saw a meme or a quote that pops up in my LinkedIn feed is that one right there, and in some way, shape, or form. So
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Good. Okay, well, so what's been a big win for you over the years? Let's talk about that. What's we talked about struggle. Let's talk about a win. What's gone well?
I think some people, they think of win as something tangible. Maybe it's a promotion or an accolade or a promotion, but I look at it as something maybe you can't touch every day. And it's the relationships. As I've started out, I'm 25 years in. Into I'm probably on the. I think it dawned on me the other day. I'm kind of over halfway point. Whether it's in my working career, and I'm like, woof, I'm on the back. I need to step it up. The first half was kind of the first half of that game was a little sloppy. And so, I got to play the last two quarters here pretty good. But I think it's relationships, Mark. It doesn't matter if I'm at a trade show or, at a Friday night football game. Um, it's the relationships that you meet from all the industry. And so it's, I see it on social media, people kind of adding and stuff on LinkedIn, but, I've got relationships from when I started my very first internship in college, working for the cargo company. Some of those friendships I made there, 25 years ago, they're still there. They're on social media. How you doing? How's your family doing? It's relationships that are built. The first few employees that I ever got the opportunity to lead, quote unquote, lead in my professional career, still very good friends with. And I've left that organization, but they still stay in touch and they talk about the good old days. And that means a lot. That means a lot when they look back and say, I remember this day when we did this or this meeting, and so or we went on this trip together, and so. I spent a stint with a fertilizer company, the Mosaic company, and I had the opportunity to take a lot of employees down to Florida and do some training and look at the mine tours. But we always wrapped up with some Top Golf or some bay fishing, somewhere on a rooftop, watching the sunset in Florida. And those are the things it's about. Then those are relationships. As I travel back out to Western Kansas or I see a winter trade show in Wichita, it's always a, hey, remember that time we went? And I think that's the biggest reward. And it's because they never go away. I mean, but again, you got to kind of go back to that at first word. You got to be intentional to keep those developed and keep those in a positive light and not take advantage of them. And so, you can't take advantage of those friendships, but and then, some it's always nice when they get reconnected. And I think we're in a very connected world today. And so, which probably helps a lot, but I think that's probably the biggest win is all the connections and all the positive memories and but then also what's to come. I'm here today because of a past connection. And so, it's good. I look at it in a positive light.
What do you think we need? I know we connect through LinkedIn and other social media platforms. If I put a Snapchat out, I mean, 100 and some people, 200 and some people look at it every time. If I put out a TikTok, there's tons of people watching this stuff. Most of them, I don't know who they are. Occasionally,
Yeah.
someone I know reaches out and says, "Hey, thanks
Yeah.
for making that." I'm like, "Okay,
Yeah.
that felt really nice." Like it's good
Yeah.
to hear
Yeah.
some feedback. Most of the time, you don't hear anything. But what do you think? What are we missing? I mean, are we missing more in-person connection these days? Are we missing more do we need more events or time at the bar? I don't like, what do you think is important for it just feels like we're connected, but we're not sometimes.
I think that nightcap or that cocktail hour is always really important. But Mark, every time you go to a trade show, there's always a happy hour, right?
Right.
They call it happy hour for a reason. You got a beer in your hand, and everybody's smiling and happy and shaking hands. But I tell this, we're in a connected world. We're in an instant time reality. But I look back, one of the positive things that did come out of COVID is how much we missed people. And what I always heard was, I miss the smile. When the
Mm.
masks came off people, like, man, it's nice to see a smile and not just a frown. And so that resonates. I mean, that really does. It can be complete strangers. And when you think about body language, when you're walking up, whether it's a customer service agent at a retail store, when you first take those first few steps to the desk and you're smiling, it probably brings a little bit of relief to that person. And it is. I think human touch, human emotion is key. And I think, and it scares me, we're leaving that a little bit. And I've got two kids right now. They're in high school and they're venturing off to college in a few years. And it does scare me a little bit on how much they rely on digital connections. And but maybe it's just a reality that I need to accept. But I've taught my kids how to shake hands, how to say thank you, how to say please, learn a second language, learn some things that just do not require two thumbs on a keyboard or on a phone. Um, how to set at a table and have a with your place setting in a professional restaurant or a sophisticated environment and be able to communicate through the situation. And those are skills that I was probably taught in 4-H and FFA and as a young leader that are going away. And it does bother me a little bit, but I just got to do my best, again, come back and bring that human element back into the process as much as I can. And
Yeah.
so I find myself saying, I have representatives and reps all the time reaching out saying, hey, let's get together. I want to promote this product or promote this sales tool. Let's just do a virtual meeting. I'm like, well, if you're within a couple hours, let's meet halfway. That's how I am.
Mhm.
Let's get together and shake hands and see each other. That to me, that's way more important than probably a virtual meeting from halfway across the US. But
Yeah.
we are in changing times though.
Yeah, that's been one of the things where the structure of our business has always been we'll do a 2-day training and then we follow that up with 12 weeks to a year's worth of coaching and we still do that. That's not going away. It's just that's the cornerstone of how we operate. And our coaching is done virtually. We can't be out on boots on the ground with 20
Yeah.
different companies that we
Yeah.
have on our roster right now. Would love it, man. If we had that many companies close by, we'd do it. I'd
Sure.
go sell them all. Um, but up through 2019, man, like that was very special and different. That level of delivery, the level of service, the high touch that we were providing was very different. Coming out of 2021, what we're finding is that it's still better maybe than your typical 2-day training. Here's your 3-ring binder, go get them tiger, kind of approach. That's not how we operate. That's not what we believe in. And what I'm also finding is a lot of our people are just a little bit overloaded with calls with the Zoom. So it's like we took the inefficiency out of in-person meetings, out of 50 to 75% of the conversations, moved it here. Now we're just doing more of them.
Yeah.
And so just like PowerPoint was great and beneficial back in the late 90s when it first became a big thing, then it got overdone. And I'm afraid that we're moving the same way with these virtual meetings. And so we're actually innovating our business right now to find the next, the next way that we can integrate into the lives to continue offer coaching and do it differently. But that's something that we've battled. And I think it's just overwhelm of digital communication.
I feel it's I can appreciate about in-person trainings. We can call them inefficient, but it's hard to put a price on energy and networking. And it's really hard to network on a Teams event or a virtual event. I had one the other day with a vendor, and I hung up, and when it was all done, we've done a series of 3 or 4 of them with kind of some cross-selling, cross-training, networking across the U.S. and Canada. And part of me wished, man, I wish we was all in a room. We spent a couple hours on these virtual meetings, and I thought, man, it would just, the conversations that would come out of that, and the growth would come out would be so much better if we was all in a room. And now I know it's probably not possible, but it's there is some great ideas out there, and there's some great people out there with some great ideas. But sometimes feeling that energy and feeling those connections face to face it's hard to put a price on that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. we talk about the 4 different levels of value in our work.
Yeah.
And so there's transactional, which is just, the exchange of money for goods and services. And there's expected. These are things, the expected value, things you got to do to stay in the game, right? This is just table stakes. You have to be able to basically provide good products, services at a competitive price, right, to be in the business. And then there's what we call the value add. And this is where every company is trying to differentiate and do something better or different in order to capture market share, right? And everybody's got their own twist, their own thing. Here's what we learn about anything that's value add today. If it's good, it's going to get copied. And if it gets copied, it eventually becomes expected.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so, that's where it's super interesting, right? So that in-person, like face-to-face, that used to be the ultimate. Now it's become like almost like, well, how many face-to-faces? We're meeting on Zoom right now. How many calls like this can I put on my calendar in a day in order to meet efficiencies, right? So that was like but the value add was, hey, you don't have to drive an hour to come meet me, right? And you don't have to pay for a plane ticket, to go see someone, right? There's cost getting saved. So the value add was a time savings, but now guess what? Everybody's doing it. So guess what? It's going to become, right? And so it takes the value out of it.
Yeah.
And now I actually think that face-to-face, that like whatever the next level of intentional is, that's going to start to creep back up into that value add. And that's the 4th level is partnership, right? So partnership is, I mean, these days in some ways is becoming like if I'm in a text message conversation with you, I'm more likely closer to a partnership.
Sure. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Than if I was sitting down face to face sometimes, because we're texting each other ideas, sometimes late at night. I might send you a meme, right? Because I think Adam's going to think this is funny as hell. It's not even related to what we do.
Yeah.
Right. But
you're exactly right. No, I think of it, and we, I worked in product development, sometimes we talk about product life cycles, but we got to think about the sales life cycle. What are we doing today that we're going to have to evolve and get better at next year and tweak and adapt to stay ahead of competition. And you're right. When you're doing something really, really well, the competition will come out and say, I got the same thing, but I can do it just a hair cheaper. Or I can do it just a little different. And so I've told our sales team, if we're getting good feedback, that's good, but that's also scary because it's going to have to be changed and evolved to the next step. And we've seen some of that. We've bundled some packages, and I'm working on doing some cross selling and with different departments. We got some things that our competition maybe can't do today. And so again, so I look at as a product life cycle is the same as a sales and leadership life cycle too. You got to keep it fresh.
Exactly. Well, and so then the same starts to apply to our organizations, right? So if it's helping you capture good talent, guess what?
Yeah.
Somebody else down the road is going to find a way to do the same thing, right? Offer that just for $2,000 a year more.
Yep. You're exactly
5,
right. Yep.
So, All right. So real quick, I just hit a couple things here as we bring this in for a landing. What what have you what do you do to maximize your productivity? We just talked about time savings by doing virtual meetings, but what do you do to maximize your productivity, stay alive, and keep thriving throughout the day?
I think a lot of it is kind of coming back to that internal chaos. Sometimes we have personal chaos in life. I think the biggest thing that I've found as when I look at my I have to look at my calendar 3 to 5 times a day, every day, to see what's been put on or what people's added to it or what I've accepted, maybe what I forgot about. One, the number thing for me today to keep thriving is being organized. Not writing down, being planned, where it's call prep. Today I prepared for this podcast as relaxed and casual as it is, Mark. I was prepared for it. But it's a lot easier to thrive on this podcast being prepared than printing off the sheet 5 minutes before and not having a clue what's coming or having no idea what's coming. And so that's the biggest thing is we get spread thin. Our audience expects instant results. And so sometimes I got to set that precedent. My office hours, I'm always available. Well, sometimes we're always available by these little phones and these little iPads, and that can be dangerous. And so there's times where I've said, hey, I'm going to disconnect this weekend. I'll be back with you Monday. And you guys set that expectation. If not, I went through a situation the other day where an employee sent a message to me it was a Saturday afternoon. And on Monday, he asked, did I do something wrong? Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And he's like, well, I sent you a message. I didn't get back from you. I'm like, I'm sorry. I was at kids' events and I was at church and I said it was the weekend. But my comment was, I was like, you need to unplug. You need to slow down a little bit. There was, and I said, I apologize, and I said, if you just got to be a little bit more clear with it. But, a lot of it's just communication, organization, and again, trying to limit that personal chaos that doesn't spill into internal chaos. That's what I'm doing today to keep my sanity. But then at the end, you got to unplug and you got to bring energy into your personal life. Go to the gym, go fishing. I have a terrible hobby of restoring Peterbilt semis, and so it's it's a very expensive hobby, but it's fun. And so unplugging and putting some energy into something that matters personally is big. Getting back into church, getting back, sometimes just going out to the shed and sweeping the floor. That's just some of the best things I enjoy. Turn on the music and unplug. So I find myself leaving my phone at home is sometimes I do on the weekends. I just don't need to be connected all the time. So
Yeah. I'm a big believer in boundaries. I know a lot of people
yep,
talk about boundaries. A lot of people are not very good at implementing boundaries. And I want more people to really maybe even rewind a little bit right there and hear what you said. And as a leader, there's a lot of power in that, right? Because
yep,
that's serving you. And in our work, we say we can only infuse others to the degree that I first infuse myself. We call this the law of infusion. So a lot
yep,
of people pouring from an empty cup. And if you find yourself pouring from an empty cup far too often, then what that means is you probably need to go fill yours up for a minute before you
yep,
keep trying to pour and it's just dry. That's where resentment comes from.
yep.
Right. And what we say is every time that I have become the most resentful in life is because of the times that I've been the least intentional with my
Yeah.
life. Right.
I read a book years ago. I want to say the author's name was Brian Dodge, and if I remember right, it's been years ago. But he had a book. It's called I think it was called Bring Energy Home, and it was talking about leaving work at work and home at home. And it was just talking about divorce rates. It was talking about turnover rates in companies, and it was just talking about really how to create a boundary and disconnect. But as we become more professional, we're expected to be connected just 24/7, and that's just some things we got to get better on. And so in my team, we are segmenting our customer lists. We're working with the intentional customers who want to work with us. We are probably segmenting away from maybe that customer that, let's just call it the pain customer, the guy or gal that just isn't there for your best results. And we have those. There's that person that will take advantage of every dollar or every hour you'll give them. And so it's been a relief. I've seen our sellers maybe add people to their sales list that they enjoy working with. That helps engage them. And I've seen some customers come off some lists, or they slide them around to different personalities on the team. Like, hey, I think you'd be good to go work with this customer. You guys really jive. And I love when I see that, because if your personalities don't align, you're not going to serve them, and they're not going to serve you to the fullest degree.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, we've talked about it on a number of episodes already in the recording of this first season. And it's time and time again, it's Pareto's principle, 80-20 rule, right? 20% of
Yep.
your business come from 80% of your, or 80% of your business is coming from 20% of your
Yep.
customers. Well, let's go focus and figure out, how do I spend, if Adam's one of my top 20% customers, I want to spend more time with that.
You're absolutely.
Right. And can I
Yep. And that's,
reduce?
and I am, we're segmenting customers by some margins and but then I'm looking at future opportunities. And I've told them, I said, if you got a customer with only one check mark out of 6 segmentation buckets, you need to evaluate the relationship with that customer. And if they're not going to get into other buckets, or if they're not going to get into the digital world or get into our, our tools and offerings, then maybe we've outgrown them. Maybe they just don't appreciate what we have, or they're missing the experience. So let's just not leave them. Let's go see what they expect. And so I have my sellers always asking, what can I stop doing for you? What can I start doing? But then what can I continue to do? And so there's a difference in those 3 questions. And I've told them, I'm like, I have a feeling when you get into your true solid relationship with your customers, it's not going to be about price. It's going to be more about things that you can do as a service or time or communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so rarely does your best customer tell you got to be cheaper all the time. And so, because they understand there's a value in your relationship.
You bet. I love that. So what do I stop doing? What do you want me to keep doing?
Yep.
Right.
And what
And
can I
what do we need
continue to do?
and what
Yep.
can I, and what do you, so what can we start? What can we stop? And what can we continue? That's great. And I think I would love more people to go have that conversation with their customer, because, in another thing that we say in our work, I've said that a lot today, but I get to train others how to treat me. I get to train my
Yep.
customer how to treat me in some cases. And that's where
Yep.
we work with a lot of ag retail salespeople who feel very much at the mercy of their farmer customer.
I told
Ultimately,
my
the farmers, my friend Colin Steen says, the farmer is the North Star. Yes, the farmer is the North Star, but they don't have to steer your ship.
Yep. I told my sellers and I told my regional leaders, if a customer tells you to start doing something or ask you to start doing something and you don't, you should not expect a lot out of that situation. They're telling you exactly what they want from you or what they do expect, and I would make sure you follow up on that. And so if they tell you to stop doing something, for the love of Pete, stop doing it. I mean, that's just and it could be, and it's usually not around price. It's around text. I'm blown away by how many farmers today or producers today are saying, quit calling me all the time, just text me. Back to that digital touch. And so it's there needs to be a mix of it, but you got to respect what they want. And I've always asked my customers, how do you want me to communicate with you? It kind of comes back to that. What do you expect? So
Yep, absolutely. All right, my friend. Well, Adam, this has been a short masterclass in intentional leadership. You've done a great job. I appreciate your intention and preparation and your time, man.
you bet. I appreciate it. It was good. Thank you very much.